You know me. And if you listen to my podcast, Brandon's World, which does in cooperation with the Vultures Live, you can check me out every Tuesday and Thursday on Brandon's World and the Brandon's World YouTube channel. Link is in the description of this podcast. I said on my Thursday show, I was best betting the Philadelphia Eagles -3 to cover and defeat the Dallas Cowboys. I said they would win by anywhere between 4 and 7 points. I said Dak Prescott would play really well. I said the difference in the game would be Philadelphia's defensive line late would make a play, or if they were down to win the game, Jalen Hurts would make the play to win the game. That's almost exactly what happened. From my perspective as a Philadelphia Eagles fan, we are 8-1. In my opinion, we're about to go to the best team in the AFC is. You can put my team up against any team in the National Football League. We have the best offensive line. We have the best defensive line in football. We will be in every single game we play because of that. And Jalen Hurts, who almost tore his ACL if it wasn't for the brace on his knee at the end of the first half, came out in the second half and put together back-to-back touchdown drives to pretty much essentially win the game if it wasn't for a couple, ticky-tack pass interference calls that got Dallas down to the 5-yard line, and that mess ensued at the end of the game. We know how divisional rivalry games are. We know how these Eagles-Cowboys games are. They are always close, and at the end, the Eagles have Jalen Hurts. They have Nick Sirianni. They have a great offensive and defensive line. They have A.J. Brown. They have Devontae Smith. They have an unstoppable brotherly shove. And unless you play perfect against Philadelphia, you're more than likely going to lose. Against 90% of the NFL teams on Sunday, the game Dallas played, they probably would have won that game. Not against Philadelphia. That's how good this Eagles team can be, Mr. Unger.
So I didn't get to watch the full game because I was driving back from Chicago that day. But I was able to catch the fourth quarter, which with Cowboys-Eagles, it basically comes down to the fourth quarter. So I saw basically all that I needed to see right there. But I was on the treadmill today, and I was able to watch most of the first half. And obviously, with Cowboys-Eagles most of the time, it comes down to those late possessions. What do you do with them? I'll tell you what, though. When Philadelphia forced Dallas to go 3-and-out on their first possession, and then the Eagles come back and score a touchdown on their first possession, I think that was actually a big turning point in this game. I know it was the first possession. I know it was early. But, coming into this, we all heard, Dallas is on the same level as Philadelphia. And, Dallas can close the gap on the Eagles and all this and that. Like, you heard that same type of thing, right?
Correct.
So, I think that's why I'm saying Philadelphia getting that 3-and-out on Dallas on the first possession and then coming back and scoring a touchdown on their first possession was a big part of the reason they won. Again, that's not to discredit what the Eagles did late or what the Cowboys did to get back into the game, because I do understand that. And obviously, if Dallas's tight end, I think his name was Schoonmaker, had moved in a couple more inches, he would have had the touchdown. And if Dak Prescott actually knew where the boundary was, he might have been able to stay inbounds and convert that 2-point conversion. Of course, we'll never know. But I will tell you this. The Eagles' offense is going to have to change now because of the loss of Dallas Goedert. I think it's going to be on Devontae Smith, actually, to really step up. And I'll tell you why. Without Dallas Goedert, I think defenses are going to start paying more attention to A.J. Brown because they know that A.J. is going to be the primary focus now. So that means Devontae Smith is going to get that single coverage. Can he step up and make those big plays when Jalen Hurts goes to him? He has that capability. There's a reason he won the Heisman Trophy, for crying out loud, when he was at the University of Alabama. And he has shown that during his time in Philadelphia, but now he's really going to be thrust into the spotlight.
So, if you remember last year, Goddard was also hurt. I believe it was on that Monday night game, the one game Philly lost at home when Jalen Hurts was the starter. On that weird play that should have been a penalty on Washington, but they ended up stripping the ball out and Goddard's shoulder got ripped out. Very similar injury. The Eagles' passing game struggled more without Dallas Goddard. It's not that Jack Stoll is incapable, or it's not that Grant Katera, who was out this past week due to a concussion. They're very good tight ends. They're just not as dynamic as Dallas Goddard. I agree with you to a sense that I think Devontae Smith is going to be the one to step up. I could also see Zachulius in the slot being more of a better option. But I also think now, especially when you look at the opponents that they're going to face, Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas again, specifically with the Kansas City and Buffalo games, I think those are two defenses that you can run the football on. And so look for potentially DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Gainwell, who looked even better against Dallas than he did the previous week against Washington. Look for Philly to potentially get the running game back going again. Because the one thing about this Philadelphia team, and Greg Olsen made it very clear, and I agree with him on the broadcast Sunday, this team is a pass-first team. Everybody thinks Philadelphia is a run-first team because they get all these rushing yards and the brotherly shove, but they are a pass-first team. But what makes them so dangerous is there are some weeks where Jalen Hurts can drop back 30, 35 times, and A.J. Brown can for 125 monster game. There are other games can hand the ball off to DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Gainwell and get literally 300 yards rushing. It makes it very hard for defenses to prepare, and that's why I keep saying, if Philadelphia does not turn the football over, and I'm not just saying this in the Eagles, I'm saying it as an unbiased NFL fan. If Philly does not turn the ball over, it's almost impossible to beat them unless you do what Washington did last year, which is run the ball at 2-3 yards apace, sustain 9-10-minute drives, and don't give the ball back to that offense, because Philadelphia very strategically plays every down like they have 4 downs to get 10 yards instead of 3, which is a real advantage.
I mean, you look at last year's Super Bowl between the Eagles and the Chiefs, you're talking about not turning the ball over. What was the real turning point in that game? It was Jalen. It was the fumble
play, and it was a fluke play. Like a lot of Jalen's turnovers have been this year. He just drops the snap, and it was really the difference. I wouldn't say it was the turning point because the Eagles were still 20-10 at the half, but it was the difference in the score of the game.
That's part of the reason why I'm saying it was the turning point.
Well, turning point in the game to me is the second half. When you have a big turnover, the wing shift. Philadelphia was still 20-10 at halftime. But in retrospect, obviously, that again, fluky turnover. And again, I really think that's the only way to beat Philadelphia is you either have to force them into 3 turnovers or you have to literally do what Washington did and run the ball at 2-3 yards a clip and make sure they don't get the ball back.
So let me ask you this. We saw Seattle get absolutely bone rushed by Baltimore.
But what about Geno Smith? How's Geno Smith looking?
A couple weeks ago, we saw Detroit get absolutely wrecked by Baltimore. Okay. San Francisco hasn't been playing great. I mean, yeah, they were on their bye week, but prior to that, they had lost 3 straight. So would you say that Dallas has now put itself as the number 2 team in the NFC?
Hold on. I want to take this moment real quick because week 1, this man, Josh Ungar, said, there's no way Dallas is better than San Francisco. They're not better than Detroit. They're not better than Seattle. And now he's asking me if I think Dallas is the number 2 team in the NFC. And my answer to you is what I've been telling you for the last about 3 weeks. The answer is no. And the reason is because we are going to forecast it. And it's not about the wins and losses every week. It's really about your team reputation. Do you have the players? You know you're going to get it right. Do you have the coach? Do you have the personnel? San Francisco, I don't even care if they lose to Jacksonville this week. I don't care if they lose four straight. They're going to win the NFC West. They're probably going to be the number two or three seed in the NFC. Whoever wins that NFC North or West are going to be the 2 or 3 seed because whoever wins the South is going to be the 4 seed because that division's a mess. So by virtue of that, I think San Francisco and Detroit are more similar than San Francisco and Philadelphia. I give the edge to San Francisco because of the fact that I don't think Jared Goff can play a good team outdoors, regardless if it's California or not. And I think Dallas, the only team that match up well against Philadelphia because it's their division rival. I don't think they match up particularly well with Detroit, and we know they don't play well against San Francisco.
So on that point, Dallas is now 0-2 against like probable playoff teams this season on the road. They lost at San Francisco 42-10. We talked about that game at length. And they lost last week against your Eagles 28-23. I get it. Both of those games were on the road, but given the way you were just laying out the NFC playoffs, Dallas is probably going to have to go on the road and play either a Philadelphia, a San Francisco. If the matchup ends up right, maybe a Detroit. Dallas has to show me that they can go on the road and beat these really good teams. Do you agree with that?
I agree, and I'm actually going to hold that conversation because speaking of showing us who the good teams are, we've gone a little bit over on the Philadelphia topic for a good reason. We got to jump to the AFC because there are a lot of good teams in the AFC, obviously. Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Jacksonville. I mean, the Chargers are not, but they have a fantastic quarterback in Justin Herbert. So
horrible head coach in Brandon Staley.
And a horrible head coach in Brandon Staley. So, Josh, the question on the screen. Who in your mind right now as we head into week 10, the best team in the AFC?
Well, I can tell you it's not the Miami Dolphins because they've only beaten bad teams. They can't win against good teams. So it is not Tua and it is not the Dolphins. As much as it pains me to say this, because we are playing them this week in Baltimore, but look at what the Ravens have done over these past few weeks. They absolutely manhandled the Detroit Lions, who came into Baltimore with all this hype, and everybody was riding the Detroit Lions train. And then, this week or last week, however you want to say it, Seattle comes in. Everybody's thinking the Seahawks are this great team, or I shouldn't say great team, but really good.
Well, you thought that.
Okay, fair enough. But you get my point, though. And the Ravens just said, yeah, no. They outscored the Seahawks and Lions by a combined total of 75-9. I mean, think about that. And they get big days from Zay Flowers or some of their other receivers. And honestly, how do they keep finding these running backs? Do they just find them on the scrapyard or something?
Because it's what I've been telling you about the running back position now. And it's probably what our 8th show now, and we have this conversation every single week. The running back position is the least most important position on the football team. It's least important than punter. You can substitute a running back in the right system, in the right offensive line, like Baltimore has done, like Philadelphia has done, what Cincinnati will eventually do for Joe Mixon. You can argue what Miami has done. And as long as you get the same amount of production by using multiple backs, by the way, New England did this for years with the likes of James White, LeGarrette Blount, Corey Dillon. among others. And then there's teams like Tennessee that don't have a quarterback, and there's teams like the Giants that think they had to pay their running back because they don't have a quarterback. Nonetheless, I agree with you that the Baltimore Ravens are the best team in the AFC, but I'm going to put a perspective out there that not a lot of people have said. I think Baltimore, and I told you this going back to the start of the season, I thought Baltimore was really good. I also think they faced two teams in Detroit and Seattle that are both flawed at the quarterback position. One in Detroit, I'm sorry, I told you this a couple weeks ago. As much as I love Jared Goff and I like him more than you do, he can't play outside against good teams. He just can't historically. He struggles on the road in less than perfect California conditions. This is what Jared Goff is. And I kept telling you for weeks and for weeks and for weeks, Geno Smith is not the answer at quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. He has struggled ever since the calendar turned from September to October. He's giving the ball away like he did back in his Jets days. And you were at that game in Seattle a couple weeks ago, and the Browns with P.J. Walker should have beaten Seattle in Seattle of what should have been an easy Seahawks win when they went up 17-0 in the first quarter. Seattle's not as good as everybody thinks they are. Detroit is good. They're not great. And so I think Baltimore just kind of exposed both those teams a little bit. And I also think it's hard to play Lamar Jackson the first time you see him. I think the real test for Baltimore is going to be a game that's coming up not this week, because I think there's a good chance that they do really well against the Browns next week when they take on the Bengals in Baltimore, Thursday night football with a healthy Joe Burrow. Because I'm going to tell you something. If something happens to Lamar Jackson, we all know his injury history. We know Kansas City's going to always be there. But Cincinnati, and I said this when they started 1-3, when they got blown out against Tennessee, I said they're about to go on a run. And look who they have knocked off. They have knocked off your Seattle Seahawks. They have knocked off the San Francisco 49ers, and they have knocked off the Buffalo Bills. And I don't care what that score was Sunday night. That game was not close. Cincinnati dominated the game throughout, and I think they are poised because they want another AFC championship game, whether it's in Arrowhead or in Cincinnati, because we both know, when we talk about Baltimore right now, it's likely one of the teams that's going to be in that AFC championship game is the Kansas City Chiefs, because the Chiefs just find a way every year, and we can't count them out no matter how bad they look right now.
And I agree with you. I just want to touch on the Buffalo Bills super quick because you brought them up. I think their window is closed. I really do.
Ooh. You know, I'm going to bring this up.
Go.
Because I brought it up at the end of last year's playoff game, and I'm not 2020 hindsight. You can check the tape. You can go on Brand's World. I said it immediately after they lost the divisional round game. I said if I was in charge of the Bills, I would have fired Sean McDermott right then and there.
Interesting.
You know how I feel about defensive coaches. You know how I feel about how they have a ceiling. And I like Sean McDermott. He comes in the Andy Reid tree. I think he's a very smart coach. He got Buffalo out of the doldrums into, playoff / fringe Super Bowl contending status. In the NBA a lot, we talk about this, right? How you need to get a coach for a young team, but he's not the coach to win you the championship.
Right.
I think it's the situation here in Buffalo. McDermott got them out of it. They had Brian Dable. They had Josh Allen. And the minute Dable left town, because Allen needs an offensive coach to sort of rein him in, and we all know what Dable did last year with Daniel Jones, I think Buffalo just knows we're behind Cincinnati. We're behind Kansas City. Now we're arguably behind Baltimore. They're going to be in every game because Josh Allen is just Josh Allen. He's a top 3 watch in the league. But I think that they need to change philosophies. Go get an offensive-minded coach. Let go of, some of those safeties and linebackers. you're spending all that money to, and go get a damn offensive line because James Cook is a decent enough running back. They can't run block to save their lives. And that's the problem with Buffalo. They are back to Josh Allen Superman, and they try to run the ball, and they can't.
I agree with you. I think part of the problem also, also with Buffalo is like while I agree with you that they rely on Josh Allen too much, when they are in their passing game, which is what, like you were just saying, they rely heavily on, they go to Stephon Diggs like on every single play. Yes,
I'll say this: Dalton Kincaid is starting to develop a tight end. I think when they get Dawson Knox back, they're going to be in a lot more 12 personnel set, which is 2 tight ends, 1 back.
Sure.
Gabe Davis does have good games. Now, he didn't. I don't even remember him at the game Sunday. It's like, did he disappear? I don't even remember him on the field.
That's what I'm saying, though.
But Gabe Davis has the ability in some games. Part of that, again, maybe play calling. Is it Ken Dorsey? But I just, there's something off with Buffalo. Before we move on to our next topic, I want to quickly address Miami because I know you think they're frauds. I'm going to throw a different word at you. You know what the Dolphins are? They're a boxer. They're a knockout punch boxer. And let me explain how.
Explain this. I'm interested.
They have a Mike Tyson quality to them that Buffalo had a couple of years ago, the year they lost to Kansas City in the divisional round in that incredible playoff game. When Miami gets a lead on you, they can blow you out by 50. When they get ahead and their speed and their guys and they're running around and they're showboating, when they get up 10-0 on you, you're done. That's it. Game over. They're going to run away and score 50 points. When they're behind, when you take away Tua's first read and you force them to slowly, methodically move their way down the field, they can't do it because they're too impatient. I don't think Miami's necessarily a fraud. I just think they're built way too much on speed, and they can't beat good teams on the road. They're a lot like Dallas to me, where they're very good at home. They could beat any team on any given Sunday, and they're big front runners. But when they trail, when they're behind, when it's a big game on the road, that's where they struggle. By the way, they shut out Kansas City in the second half, and if it wasn't for that wild defensive play where they forced a fumble and they learned it back and Kansas City took it back, Miami had a chance to win that game in Germany on a neutral field against Kansas City. So I went away from that saying Miami's got problems, but I think they're getting better. And I don't want to call them frauds. I don't think they can necessarily win a Super Bowl unless they get some luck going their way. But I don't think they're these punching bags or these frauds that everybody thinks they are.
You know what's interesting is throughout this conversation, we talked about Baltimore. We talked about Kansas City a little bit. We talked about Cincinnati. We talked about Buffalo. And you just talked about Miami. Who did we not talk about, though?
It's Jacksonville, and it's because I don't trust their defense. And I don't think they have enough big-time star weapons to go up with a Cincinnati, to go up with a Baltimore, to go up with Kansas City, because we've seen they can't match up with Kansas. For whatever reason, they don't match up well with Kansas City, and their defense does not have the pass rush or the star-studded names that I think could, lock down a Burrow and a Chase or, even a Tyreek Hill if they were to match up with Miami. That's my concern for Jacksonville, and I think that they'll win the division and they'll get a high seed, but I think they're a year away. I think they need another pass rusher, and I think they need another corner.
Okay. Well, we're going to find out about Jacksonville because they host both Baltimore and Cincinnati and
San Francisco this week.
That game should have been flexed into Sunday Night Football instead of Jets Raiders.